You're listening to the Lazenby Experience podcast with your host, Joshua Lazenby. The Lazenby Experience podcast is a podcast to help individuals find their way to their success. Whether it's going to a 4-year university, community college, trade school, or anything else, my goal is to be a resource to help you along the way. I'll be sharing my personal ups and downs, as well as tips as I continue my journey to receive my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. I will also have guests to share their stories, advice, and experiences. So come along for the ride as you begin your journey to your success. Welcome to another episode of the Lazenby Experience podcast. And if this is your first time tuning in, thank you for tuning in. This will be a great episode to tune in on. I will be going over preparing for an interview. So my last few episodes, I have been talking about how to prepare for a career fair. So if you haven't watched those yet, I will watch those first just to help you prepare for a career fair that can also help you kind of prepare for a interview as well, as far as having your resume ready, as far as having an elevator pitch and that sort of thing. So definitely check those episodes out if you haven't already. So today I'll be going over 3 different types of interviews that are had for any type of job, really. And definitely with this coronavirus going on, a lot of companies, or some companies, might still be hiring, but the way they do interviews probably have changed, since they can't really be that close to individuals. They're probably doing more phone call and webcam interviews. So I'll be going over those, but I'll also be going over in-person interviews, because when this is all over, they will go back to having in-person interviews, and it was great still to have that information as well. So like I just said, the 3 types of interviews I'll be going over is interviews over the phone, web/Skype, and those are kind of 2 different kind of interviews that I'll be talking about with that, and then in-person interviews. So the first thing, and then I'm also going to talk about some things that you should know for any type of interview. So I'll be going over those 3, and then a couple other things too. So first interview type is over the phone. So is self-explanatory. It's an interview that you have over the phone with a prospective employer. Some things that you should be ready for, or that should help you be prepared for that interview, is number 1, if you have to call them, which is probably less than, probably like 1% of the time you might have to call them. Most of the time the employer is going to call you, but if for some instance they want you to call them, make sure you call on time. I wouldn't call no more than 5 minutes early, because you don't know what that person has scheduled before your interview. They might be finishing up another interview, they might be finishing up a job task, so make sure you call on time, and definitely don't call late, because that would definitely reflect poorly on you. And then if they are calling you, which is, like I said, probably 99% of the time, I would say be ready for that call at least 10 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes early. I have had a phone interview where it was supposed to be at a certain time, and they called a few minutes earlier than that time. Also had them when they call a little bit late. So definitely be flexible, and make sure you block out, I would say, 15 minutes before the interview, and then depending on how long the interview is supposed to last, maybe 15 minutes more than that, just in case it goes over. Next, when talking on the interview, I know it might sound silly, you might even feel silly doing it, but try to smile while you talk, because you can definitely tell how someone sounds, or how they sound, or how enthusiastic they are about a job, by the way they are talking. And smiling can help you sound more enthusiastic than if you're just frowning and talking monotone. Sometimes, like I do, but I do make sure if I'm doing a phone interview, I am more upbeat and I'm more excited about the interview and not just kind of speaking in my regular tone. So definitely put a smile on your face when you're doing an interview, especially when you're talking about why you want to work for that job or what made you apply for that job. Those kind of questions. Make sure you're smiling and having an upbeat kind of tone so they can kind of feel your excitement for the job because they can't see you. So the less they see you, the more you have to compensate on other things like your voice. And then the last thing with the phone interview, you want to make sure you're in a distraction-free location. So if you're doing an interview at your house or at your apartment, make sure it's a room where you can have either locked or you can put a sign outside the door saying, please don't come in, or some sort of thing. If you're outside your apartment, outside your residence, try to find a quiet space, maybe your car. If you're at school, maybe in the library, because that's probably the quietest place you'll find. Because you want to make sure that you are concentrating on that interview. You're not distracted by somebody walking past, people are laughing, a bird or anything like that. You want to make sure you're in a spot where you can stay focused just on that interview. But those are the quick tips. I think it's 4 different tips I have for the phone interview. Like I said, I have some things I will be talking about that will cover any type of interview that you have. So that's not the only thing, but those are a few things I thought were important when you are having an over the phone interview. Next, we're going to go over web/Skype interviews. So these are probably going to be very popular at this time just because of the stay-at-home orders and you're not being able to go be 6 feet away from people and that kind of thing. So these are probably the interviews that a lot of people are going to have within the next probably a couple months. So I think this is something that you definitely should pay attention to right now if you're not paying attention to anything else, or if you're not going to remember anything else. Now with this type of interview, there are a couple of different types. So you can have a kind of like an in-person interview where the other person is on the other side of the webcam. You're actually having an interview. And then there's another type where it's kind of like formulated questions, and you have to look at the questions and then you have to kind of record yourself answering those questions and submit your interview that way, and then they look over that way, which I have done both. So I'm going to talk about both and hopefully some good tips that can help you if you have either one. So I'm going to start off with the in-person webcam interview. So of course, the one thing that you want to do is make sure you're dressed at least from the top up, like you're going to a regular interview. So if you have a suit, wear your suit, just like if you went to a career fair. If you only have a shirt and tie, wear that. If you don't have a tie, at least wear a nice button-up shirt. And if you are going to just wear a top, make sure you are aware of that throughout the whole interview. So just in case you have to get up for something, make sure they don't see your bottom. I personally, when I had my webcam interview, I just had my top as far as my button-up shirt and a tie, but I didn't have to get up for anything because I had my resume just in case I needed it right there. Had pen and paper right there at my fingertips, so I wouldn't have to get up and get anything. So you don't have to wear slacks or anything like that, but just make sure you're aware that you don't get up by accident and they can see that. Also with this, make sure it's distraction free and that you have kind of a clear back or not too noisy background. So I have a wall behind you, a closed window or something like that. Don't have it where it's a open window or like a window without any blinds, and then people walk past or birds fly past or anything like that, because you don't want anything to distract you, but you also don't want anything to distract the interviewer as well. You want to make sure that you are making it as distraction free as possible. So again, if you have a nice quiet room, if you're at a library, you can definitely do it there inside. Maybe a lot of libraries have different like meeting rooms that you can use, so maybe that as well. So make sure it's distraction free for both ends. And then also make sure it's good lighting, because you are being able to be seen by the interviewer. You want to make sure that they see you. It's not a phone interview, so you don't have to kind of compensate for them not seeing you. You can just make sure you have good lighting so they can see how you react and how you look, and you look professional. Next, make sure that this is very important, and I actually had this happen to me before, not because of me, but because of the interviewer. Make sure your technology is working beforehand. The night before, an hour before, make sure that you know that your technology works. So if you're doing a Skype meeting, make sure you can log on to Skype. Your computer, the volume works, the audio works, the camera, the camcorder work, and all of that kind of stuff. Because if it doesn't work, you want to make sure you contact the person who's interviewing you to let them know that you don't have the correct equipment to actually do the interview, so they can either reschedule it or possibly have it done in a different way, like a phone interview or something like that. So definitely make sure your technology, your computer, most likely a laptop, works. And then again, be ready 10 to 15 minutes beforehand. Make sure you have everything you need. Maybe we'll talk about this later, but make sure you have like a resume, paper and pencil, just in case you need to write anything down and that kind of thing. So those are the things I think you should have as far as a real interview or in-person interview on Skype. And then for the ones that are like recordings, again, make sure you're in a distraction-free place, because a lot of times when you're doing recording for an interview, it is timed, and the one time that I had to do it, some of the questions you could not like re-record. So you have to read the question one time, and then you have to record it within like a minute or so, and then that is how you did the interview. So make sure it's distraction free, and that you won't accidentally press record and you're not ready or anything like that. Again, make sure it's good lighting, because again, this is the way they're gonna see you. They're not gonna see you in person, so make sure they can see how you look and how you present yourself, so you can come out more, stand out more. With this one, you do want to make sure that you read everything before you press record or press submit or press agree, because you don't know if it's something you might need in the future. You might not be able to go back to it. So make sure you read everything, and possibly even write some notes down just in case you forget anything. You won't forget anything. Always have paper and pencil ready for that. And then definitely want to make sure, and this is actually for the other one too, make sure your internet connection is good. Whether it's your home internet at school, make sure you know it is reliable, and that you know it won't cut off just while you're in the middle of an interview. You don't know what's going to happen if it submitted it, if you have to do it over, if you can't do it again, or anything like that. So definitely make sure your internet connection is reliable and it is connected. And then the last thing I have for recording, if you have to record your interview, is make sure you actually submit it at the end. You don't want to do the interview and then the last thing you figure out to do is submit it, and then they never got to it or never got it, and then you lose a good job opportunity just because you didn't press submit. So definitely make sure you submit it. A lot of companies might send you an email verification that they received it or something like that. So definitely look out for that. And those are all my tips I have just for the webcam / Skype interview. And then the last interview, again, those are the interviews are probably going to be the ones that are going to be if you're having an interview anytime within, like, from now up until like the end of the summer possibly. So definitely make sure you know those tips and you write them down if you have to. Rewatch this if you have to, just so you can be ready for those interviews. The last type of interview is in-person interview. A lot of interviews are done in person. I'm pretty sure a lot of you, if you have done an interview, it's probably done in person. But here are my tips for that. Like the other ones, like the phone call, you want to make sure you're there 10 to 15 minutes early. A lot of times some companies might have interviews back to back on the same day, so you want to make sure you're there early so you can be there for your slot, because some people, they might be like, you're not here on time or you're not here early, so we're going to move on to the next candidate. So definitely make sure that you are there early. Next, dress professionally like you did at the career fair. So if you have a suit, definitely wear the suit with, when I was talking about the career fair, I said a nice suit. I said black, gray, or navy blue, and then a nice solid color or light color shirt. So like a white shirt or any kind of light color, and then a nice tie that matches that suit and shirt. It can even be the same suit that you wore to the career fair. As long as it's clean and it's ironed and it look professional, it really doesn't matter. They're not going to judge you like that's the same suit he wore when I seen him at the career fair. They're not going to judge you off that. They will judge you if you're wearing jeans and gym shoes to their interview, though. So definitely don't do that. And if you don't have a suit, the next best thing would be a nice button-up shirt with a tie. For some reason you don't have a tie, a nice button-up with slacks, dress shoes, of course, will be the third option. If you don't have any of that, I would definitely suggest you go to Goodwill, go somewhere, maybe borrow some clothes from someone, because that is an important part of the interviewing process. So definitely you want to look the part as well. Next, I said bring plenty of resumes. When I say plenty, you don't have to bring as many as you probably did to the career fair. At the most, maybe 3 or 4. Because I personally like to have a copy of my resume with me when I'm doing a interview, and then also have a copy ready for the person or maybe people who are interviewing me, just in case they didn't bring it. I want to make sure they have a copy for them as well. I have been interviewed by one person. I have been interviewed by 2 people before. So I definitely bring, I would say at least 3, so I can have one, and then the people who are interviewing me can have one as well. And I will talk more about why I have a resume for myself in a few. And then the last thing, which is also really important, when shaking hands, make sure it is firm and you're looking at the person in their eyes when you're shaking their hand. So don't give a limp handshake. Don't look to the wall or look at their shirt. Make sure you're looking at that person in their eyes, and then you're having a very firm handshake. Not very tight, but also not very loose. And then there are some people who do shake hands very tightly that are interviewers, and there are some of them who shake very loosely. But you want to kind of be in the middle. You want to show that you are confident in yourself and that you are capable or qualified for that position that you're applying for. And a lot of people will, I want to say judge you, but they will see you in a different light, just based off the way that you shake their hand. And that's, first impressions are always the most important, because that's how they base the rest of their experience or the rest of their time with you, based off that first impression. So definitely you want to make it as best as possible. So those are the 3 types of interviews that I went over today: the over the phone, the Skype / webcam, and the in-person. But there are a few things that I want to go over that you should do no matter what kind of interview that you are having. So first thing is, you want to make sure you have your resume. Excuse me. You want to make sure you have your resume in front of you. A lot of questions, or a lot of times, an employer might ask you to explain something from your resume, or explain experience or a leadership role. You want to have that in front of you, so you can kind of, if it's something that you wrote more about, like if it's a position that you had and they want to know more about it, you can look at that position. You can kind of skim over what you wrote and then kind of go off of that, because you might not remember everything that you did for that job. So you want to make sure you can have a reference to that if you have to answer any of those type of questions. Next thing is, also, this is what I learned from the last time I had to do an interview, is use the STAR method when answering questions. I think this is a very smart way to kind of organize the way you're talking out a question, and kind of have them be able to go along. You're not just going off of some kind of tangent or rant or something like that. So the STAR method, of course, is an acronym. S is for a specific situation. So if they ask you a behavioral question, a lot of interviews are behavioral questions, so these are great for those type of questions. Technical questions, they might work. It depends on the question, but definitely keep it in the back of your head if you have a technical interview. So the S stands for a specific situation. So you want to start out talking about a specific situation that is geared towards that question that they're asking you. And then T is for task. So you want to talk about the task that you actually performed in that situation, or the task that you had to take, or whether if it was like a group project or anything like that. You want to make sure what was the task at hand that you guys had to perform. A is for action, so what you actually did in that task, or that you have to do within that group, or if you were by yourself, what you actually did. And then the result, so what actually came about that that situation. So whether it's good, whether it's bad, you want to give them a result. And then if it is bad, you want to give a reason why it was bad, and even something that you learned from that situation. When you're in the interview, companies or employers or interviewers, they're not looking for someone who's perfect. They're looking for someone who's well-rounded. So who, you might not know the answers to this question, but you know a lot about another question. So if you don't know something, I think I put this on here, so I'll talk about it when I get there. So next, make sure you ask questions at the end, even during the interview. Like if there's something that you didn't understand, a question that you don't understand, make sure that you let them know you didn't understand the question, and you would like them to repeat it or rephrase it so you can answer it to the best of your ability. But definitely at the end of the interview, you want to have, I would say, at least 2 or 3 questions prepared that you can ask them. Now, I actually prepared some questions that you can ask them. It is on my blog, which I haven't wrote in a while, but I do have a tab on my blog that is tips and tricks. And then if you keep going down, it will say, I think it's called questions for an interview. And they have like 30 questions that you can use in the interview that you can ask that employer that can really help you look like you're interested in a company, and then also kind of have you stand out. So my blog, the website you'll go to is lazenbyexperience.wordpress.com. So that's LAZEN, B as in boy, Y, experience.wordpress.com. And then you press the tab that says tips and tricks. And then you'll go down to the blog post that says questions for interview, or interview questions, is something like that. And then again, I have a list of about 29 or 30 questions. I think I highlighted the ones that I like to use the most. And then some of them you might not be confident enough to ask, which is okay. But some of them are very good questions you want to ask, not only so you can look like you want to be in a position, but also you can gather more information about that company or about that position, so you can really know if you want to be in that position. Because you need to understand, when you're in an interview, it shouldn't be just you trying to get a job. It should be you also trying to see if this is a job that you want to have. So just because they offer you the job doesn't mean you have to accept it. So make sure when you're in that interview, you're getting information about them, about that company, about that position, just as they are getting information about you. And that kind of ties into my next tip, which is take notes. So when you're asking questions and they answer it, definitely take notes so you can remember it for later, because you might have 2 or 3 offers and you want to make sure you pick the best one that is for you. And it can be from a range of things, of how much they offer, what kind of task you will be performing, the kind of environment you'll be working in, just so you can have a mental note of what kind of job, or the job you'll be working at if you decide to accept their offer. So take as many notes as you can. And then a lot of employers or interviewers, they really like seeing people who are not just interviewing for the job, but actually trying to see if that job fits them. And taking notes is one sign of you actually going a step further and trying to figure out if that's a company that you want to continue, or that you want to start working for once the interview is over. Next, this is very important too, because I feel like a lot of people feel that once the question is asked during the interview, they have to immediately answer it. So don't be afraid to pause if you don't have an answer right away. I do that like all the time, and sometimes I even say, can I take a second to think about it? And they always say, sure, and take all the time you need. Of course, you don't want to take 30 minutes trying to figure out an answer for it. But if it takes you 30 seconds, if it takes you a minute, don't be afraid, or don't feel like you're not going to get the job just because you had to take a pause for a question. Because some questions are not something you might have just thought about, or you can just answer right away. Some of them you have to think about a nice situation, the task you have to perform, the actions that you did, and then the result. So you'll make sure you will have all of that ready for each question, or at least the questions that make sense for, and have that ready, and then talk it out during the interview. And then second to last, don't be afraid to say you don't know the answer to a question. That is very important too, because like I said, interviewers are not looking for the perfect candidate. They're looking for a well-rounded candidate. And I have a perfect example for that, because my last interview that I went to was for an internship that I'm having for this summer. And like half of the interview was behavioral questions, and then the second half was technical questions, which that was the first time I ever did a technical interview like that. So I was kind of nervous, but I just went through it, and there was like one or two questions that they asked that I didn't know the answer to, and I didn't want to just give them like pretend like I know the answer, because if I give them the wrong answer, it looks worse than if you say you don't know the answer to it. But it was 1 or 2 questions that I was like, I don't know, I don't know, or I said I don't know the answer to, but I can get back to you if you would like me to. And I end up getting that job position, or that internship for this summer. So don't be afraid to say you don't know something. If you really don't know it, if you think you know it, you can say, this is I'm not 100% sure, but I believe this is the correct answer, or some sort of thing like that. So definitely don't be afraid if you don't know anything, which kind of leads to my last point, which is be confident. So even if you don't know something, even if you don't have a suit, but you have a nice shirt and that's all you have, but everybody else was wearing a suit, even if you stumbled on a question, or you weren't there at the time that you wanted to be there, always be confident, because that helps out not just you, but it makes them feel that you know what you want. So stay confident. If you have any questions, if you want me to go over something more in depth, if you did understand something that I talked about, please just hit me up. My email is Lazenby Experience. That is LAZENBY Experience @gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this episode, about a previous episode. Maybe you have an idea, or you have questions that you want to ask that I can possibly do another episode on. Definitely hit me up. All my podcast episodes are available almost anywhere you listen to podcasts. So if you like Facebook, I have a Facebook page that you can like. YouTube, I have a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to. You can listen to Apple Podcasts. Some of my episodes are on SoundCloud. So almost anywhere. If you go to my Facebook page, there's a link you can click on that has all of the platforms that you can listen to my podcasts on. But that is all I have for today. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, continue your journey until you reach your success. Thanks for listening to the Lazenby Experience podcast with me, Joshua Lazenby. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something to help you along your journey to your success. The Lazenby Experience podcast will continue to be available anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Facebook, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. If you really enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating, and write a comment. For any questions, you can reach me at lazenbyexperience@gmail.com. Until next time, continue your journey until you reach your success.